Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening. Welcome to the View Up Here. I'm your host, Canadian Glenn, and it is June 12th, 2019. Tonight, the Christchurch Call, Canada's digital charter, and the Trust Project. Progress or avoidance? Tragedy such as the massacre in New Zealand rightly brings calls for action from the public at large and therefore from governments. It seems that there's a new wrinkle with every terror event, and Christchurch exposed the futility of big data to control content. Now, the most disturbing part may be that despite Facebook removing the terrorist video in short order, it was copied and reposted globally by a magnitude over the live views. The Christchurch Call is the resulting action from a global group of nations, corporations, and monitoring agencies. Builds on initiatives already underway, mostly from a control perspective, but calls for urgent measures by platform providers first, government regulatory efforts second. History does not indicate that big data can or will control the problems on their own. Where the momentum goes, as the latest mass slaughter of innocents fades from screens, is yet to be determined. Canada has not been a spectator as the internet devolves, and implications are that patience is wearing thin. Electoral integrity has been in the news with a lack of cooperation from social media platforms to comply to new law. The reality is any regulatory measures on big data will fall to the next government. Canada's digital charter seeks to reform competition and privacy rules to build a quote-unquote foundation of trust between Canadians and the digital world. It's the result, to this point, of a topic that has been prominent since 2016 for Ottawa. How much can be accomplished without regulation and penalties for non-compliance? How can big data be trusted? Enter a private initiative called the Trust Project. Funded and controlled by big data and friends, the premise is to restore credibility to media, but not all media. Which media? It is a new censorship and independent media suppression tool? Is it integrity or revenue that drives these efforts? And will AI, artificial intelligence, algorithmic policing help or continue to either suppress, ban, or confuse things without proper course? Never a dull moment in this topic of discussion lately on the internet. But, when there's money to be made, shit moves fast. I'm going to start with the Christchurch Call. Now, there is an actual website, christchurchcall.com. This is directly from there. It's posted on May 15th. I'll read from it to explain what the plan is. Details? Not really. A free, open, and secure internet is a powerful tool to promote connectivity, enhance social inclusiveness, and foster economic growth. The internet is, however, not immune from abuse by terrorist and violent extremist actors. This is tragically highlighted by the terrorist attacks of 15th March 2019 on the Muslim community of Christchurch. Terrorist attacks that were designed to go viral. The dissemination of such content online has adverse impacts on the human rights of the victims, on our collective security, and on people all over the world. The events of Christchurch highlighted once again the urgent need for action and enhanced cooperation among the wide range of actors with influence over this issue, including governments, civil society, and online service providers, such as social media companies, to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online. The call outlines collective voluntary commitments from governments and online service providers intended to address the issue of terrorist and violent extremist content online and to prevent the abuse of the internet as occurred in and after the Christchurch attacks. To that end, we, the governments, commit to voluntarily counter the drivers of terrorism and violent extremism by strengthening the resilience and inclusiveness of our societies to enable them to resist terrorist and violent extremist ideologies, including through education, building media literacy to help counter distorted terrorist and violent extremist narratives, and the fight against inequality. Ensure effective enforcement of applicable laws. If only there were more laws. Ensure effective enforcement of applicable laws that prohibit the production or dissemination of terrorist or violent extremist content in a manner consistent with the rule of law and international human rights law, including freedom of expression. Encourage media outlets to apply ethical standards when depicting terrorist events online and to avoid amplifying terrorist and violent extremist content. So, limit your revenue. Support frameworks such as industry standards to ensure that reporting on terrorist attacks does not amplify the content without prejudice to responsible coverage of terrorism and violent extremism. Consider appropriate action to prevent the use of online services to disseminate this content, including through collaborative actions such as awareness raising and capacity building activities aimed at smaller online service providers, development of industry standards or voluntary frameworks, regulatory or policy measures consistent with a free, open, and secure internet and international human rights law. So it took almost 3 pages to get to where they finally say regulatory or policy measures. Now, what about the other side of the coin here? To that end, we, the online service providers, commit to take transparent, specific measures seeking to prevent the upload of terrorist and violent extremist content and to prevent its dissemination on social media and similar content sharing services, including its immediate and permanent removal without prejudice to law enforcement and user appeals requirements in a manner consistent with human rights and fundamental freedoms. Cooperative measures to achieve these outcomes may include technology development, the expansion and use of shared databases of hashes and URLs, and effective notice and takedown procedures. Remember the wording of that as we get into the corporate efforts to police the internet. Technology development, expansion and use of shared databases of hashes and URLs. This will become relevant. Provide greater transparency in the setting of community standards or terms of service, including by outlining and publishing the consequences of sharing this content, describing policies and putting in place procedures for detecting and removing this content. Not only will they provide transparency on what their supposed rules are, but the next one is to actually enforce those community standards or terms of service in a manner consistent with human rights and fundamental freedoms, including by prioritizing moderation of this content, however identified, closing accounts where appropriate, providing an efficient complaints and appeals process for those wishing to contest the removal of their content or a decision to decline the upload of their content. Implement immediate, effective measures to mitigate the specific risk through live streaming, including identification of content for real-time review. Implement regular and transparent public reporting in a way that is measurable and supported by clear methodology on the quantity and nature of this content being detected and removed. Remember this as we get further into the show as well. Review the operation of algorithms and other processes that may drive users towards and/or amplify this content to better understand possible intervention and to implement changes. Now, this may include using algorithms and other processes to redirect users from such content, or the promotion of credible, positive alternatives or counter-narratives. This may include building appropriate mechanisms for reporting, designed in a multi-stakeholder process, and without compromising trade secrets or the effectiveness of service providers' practices through unnecessary disclosure. So now what that tells us is there's a fundamental business issue with people working together, platform to platform, because their algorithmic toys are proprietary. They may share what they want the results to be, but they don't share how they acquire them from their feed fire hose. So, we could probably play along, but, you're not risking a nickel of our money. Now, together, governments and online service providers commit to work collectively to work with civil society to promote community-led efforts to counter violent extremism in all its forms, including through the development and promotion of positive alternatives and counter messaging. Develop effective interventions based on trusted information sharing about the effects of algorithmic and other processes to redirect users from terrorist and violent extremist content. So there we go. It says right there, governments will work with providers to develop algorithmic toys. Accelerate research into and development of technical solutions, which means AI, to prevent the upload and to detect and immediately remove this content online. And these solutions they're willing to share. Support research and academic efforts to better understand, prevent, and counter this content online. Ensure appropriate cooperation with and among law enforcement agencies. Oh, that's sure easy to put into a little press release, isn't it? Why would that be a problem? Support smaller platforms as they build capacity to remove this content, including through sharing technical solutions and relevant databases of hashes or other relevant material. collaborate and support partner countries in the development of implementation of best practice. I think we all understand how this game works. Hey, big first world country, who should we use to police our internet? Don't worry, we've got somebody for that. How come he's bringing all your content? Never mind. Just let him do his job. Develop processes allowing governments and online service providers to respond rapidly, effectively, and in a coordinated manner to the dissemination of this content following a terrorist event. This may require the development of a shared crisis protocol and information sharing processes. Respect and for governments protect human rights. So, everybody says, yes, we have a real problem and we need to address this. So we've got all these voluntary things that mean a little bit different than what they appear to mean. But, we're still, everybody's on board. Everybody's on board. Well, like I said, remember some of the words there. Now, as far as taking a constructive look at this, I just want to say that the RightsCon convention for 2019 is now underway in Tunisia. Have a good conference, everybody. It was a lot of fun last year in Toronto. Access Now is one of the drivers behind RightsCon. This article I'm going to look at now is from accessnow.org. Javier Pereiro, this is from May 15th. The Christchurch Call, Rights, Wrongs, and What's Next. It says, a group of governments led by New Zealand and major tech companies, including Facebook, Microsoft, Google, and Twitter, signed and published the Christchurch Call, a voluntary pledge with commitments aimed at eliminating terrorist and violent extremist content online. The Christchurch Call follows the tragic shootings in Christchurch, New Zealand, in early March. In response to this and other tragic attacks, where the attackers have used online platforms or services to publish and propagate abhorrent, violent material, governments around the world are scrambling to enact new, far-reaching laws or policies in an effort to clamp down on speech posted or shared on social media platforms. Addressing the root causes and means of perpetuating violence against communities is a legitimate and critically important public policy objective. However, a rushed response that targets online speech but ignores the systemic issues behind it would put fundamental rights at risk while also failing to prevent attacks. Now, this is Access Now's response to the call. For at least a decade, the consensus has been that to address the key challenges of our time and keep the internet free, open, and secure, we must use an open, inclusive, multi-stakeholder approach. Increasingly, however, initiatives for collective action that would benefit from multiple diverse perspectives disregard this model. The Christchurch Call is yet another unfortunate example. The governments of France and New Zealand, which led the drafting of the text and brought together the other actors, did not create the text through an inclusive public consultation. Instead, those leading the conversation developed the recommendations for key governments and tech companies behind closed doors. In a welcome move to increase transparency, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern reportedly, over the objections of the French government, convened a meeting in Paris for civil society called Voices for Action, in which Access Now participated. This meeting took place only a day before the Christchurch Call was released. The objective was for civil society stakeholders to provide input into how the call should be implemented, not to seek feedback on what was in it. Those attending were given the text of the call just 2 working days before its announcement took place. Engaging stakeholders is important, but this meeting did not address the problem of the lack of consultation on the substance of the call. and the short time frame of lack of information to prepare hindered the capacity for providing input of value. Additionally, it kept civil society separate from the other key stakeholders, namely corporations and governments, dramatically limiting the ability to meaningfully engage. This was all despite the fact that civil society groups are referenced several times in the document and are expected to help with implementation. What does the Christchurch Call get right? In comparison to other initiatives aimed at limiting or stopping the dissemination of terrorist or extremist content online, such as the EU's proposed terrorist content regulation or the law criminalizing social media executives in Australia, both of which dangerously ignore the potential impact on human rights, the Christchurch Call is a more measured and considered set of measures. The Christchurch Call explicitly cites human rights as both a guiding objective of government action and a limiting factor. It also underlines transparency obligations for companies and governments. These are fundamental pillars of any public or private attempt to regulate the online space, and it is therefore very welcome to see that they are explicitly recognized. When it comes to implementing recommendations, the call invites governments and companies to engage with and discuss further steps with other actors, notably with civil society. And as explained previously, this invitation can only be made effective through actual engagement. What could the Christchurch Call have improved? Establishing a process for identifying and removing objectionable speech that could facilitate violence, discrimination, or other harm is a complex task and has numerous possible failure points. The definitions must be narrow and specific. The process must be transparent and fair, and those who are required to act must be clearly identified and provided incentives not to go too far in removing legitimate discourse or commentary. This applies to the Christchurch Call, which aims to address the content, a concept that can vary between countries and in some cases can be used arbitrarily to work against human rights. For example, journalists in Jordan, Urdun, have been prosecuted under that country's terror laws for reporting that is critical of the government. The call also urges action by online service providers without defining what is meant by that. Under this broad umbrella term, we could see numerous unrelated internet services, such as infrastructure providers like DNS operators or telecommunications carriers, affected by rules not intended for them. To resolve this, the call should have asked governments to ensure the use of clear, unambiguous, limited, and specific definitions in any related policy or regulations. The call also relies heavily on upload filters as a technical tool to prevent the dissemination of violent content. Well, in some cases, it may be clear that content is not appropriate. In most, the interpretation requires meaningful human involvement and evaluation of context. This makes the analysis and determination of violent content incompatible with automatic filtering. The use of automated systems in content moderation must be carefully evaluated before rollout and deployed only in a limited set of circumstances, as this use has serious implications, not only for freedom of expression, but also other fundamental rights, such as privacy. Last but not least, the call focuses primarily on putting the responsibility for identifying and removing this content on internet companies. Now, these companies do have a key role to play and must live up to their responsibilities to society as well as their duty to respect human rights. However, government should never outsource the regulation of speech to private entities, as doing so removes principles of due process and government accountability. Users deserve a clear, predictable, and human rights compatible framework for the protection of their freedom of expression online. Governments, together with companies operating within their jurisdictions, are responsible for providing the conditions for the enjoyment of human rights. Now, just ahead of the Christchurch Call, Facebook announced changes to its Facebook Live policy. These changes would entail a one-strike policy for users who violate Facebook's most serious policies from the company's community standards and terms of service. Those users could get banned from the platform for up to 30 days. Facebook's announcement does not specify which policies are the most serious, and you could get a 30-day suspension. It's not clear why Facebook has chosen to make this its first public move in the context of the call to address the issue of terrorist content. The internal rules that will be covered by this measure are also not specified. Yet transparency and clarity are essential requirements of any such measures. Users cannot be expected to infer what types of behavior could lead to such a ban without clear and easily accessible guidance. Drink break. The connection between Facebook's announced measures and the tragic events at Christchurch are not entirely clear. As Facebook itself explained at the time, there were only 200 people watching live during the attack, while what made it difficult to contain the dissemination of the video were the 1.5 million edited copies of the video that kept being uploaded well after the attack was over. Moreover, the response doesn't get to the heart of what could actually make a difference: changes in Facebook's business model, which currently entails collecting massive amounts of data and promoting engagement over other priorities or values. The issue of how platforms make decisions regarding content and advertising for the purpose of monetization is not addressed by Facebook's announcement or in most government-led content moderation initiatives. Most of the issues Access Now raises in this post have been voiced in a joint statement by civil society that Access Now endorses. And the statement raises additional important points on the call and its merits. The statement, facilitated by the civil society organization Internet NZ, is an effort to bring civil society voices to the call in spite of the flawed process for creating it. Access Now thanks Internet NZ for its work on this, and we commend the Government of New Zealand for its willingness to listen and to keep listening to those important voices. We look forward to meaningful collaboration and civil society participation in the future within the scope of the call or in other government and company-led initiatives. I will state for maybe, the fifth time on this show, and we'll get to it further as well, but all of a sudden it's an international priority that we have to have digital Bill of Rights. Well, 13 months ago, I can remember voting on a digital Bill of Rights at RightsCon. Over 2,000 people with over 120 countries represented. So, how many people were in on the Christchurch Call? Never mind. Now we'll move on to Canada's Digital Charter. It is being marketed very slick. It is not being marketed in a hurry. This is a slow build, and it's nowhere near any result. At least there is some movement, which is an improvement over other governments I would name. It's not blatantly being directed. But again, just like I said, there were little phrases in the Christchurch Call that I would like you to keep fresh in your mind. Those same little pieces will show up here in the Digital Charter, and there's also some new ones, and we'll get to that as we work through it. Oh, it's really dry here today. Plus 28. Hope everybody's getting summer. This is from the National Observer, back on May 21st. This is by Fatima Syed. Canada seeks to reform competition and privacy rules in the Digital Charter. The Canadian government is proposing reforms to Canada's competition and privacy legislation as part of a suite of measures to rebuild a quote-unquote foundation of trust between Canadians and the digital world. Innovation Minister Navdeep Bains delivered this message as he laid out 10 principles of a new digital charter in a speech to a Toronto business crowd gathered at the Empire Club. These principles included ensuring universal access to internet for all Canadians, enforcing safe and secure access, allowing personal control and consent over data, and committing to using data and digital for good, which includes defending freedom of speech while limiting hate speech. There will be clear, meaningful penalties for violations of the laws and regulations that support these principles, the minister told the crowd. After the speech, Minister Bains told reporters that it would be a significant fine for data breached and a failure for companies to disclose the breach to the individual and the Privacy Commissioner. Clearly, if a company does not follow our privacy laws, there are going to be significant and meaningful fines. The minister, however, didn't specify specific details of proposed changes to laws and regulations and how stiff those penalties may be. For example, this year, France imposed a 50 million euro fine on Google. Now, with only 4 weeks left in Parliament's calendar before it rises for the summer, and only 5 months before the next federal election, it's not clear whether these 10 principles can be turned into legislation before Canadians head to the polls. When asked why the government was proposing principles without detailing legislative changes, Bain said Canada is already in a strong position with our privacy laws, and the Digital Charter will further enhance those laws by putting some strong mechanisms for consent, control, transparency, and enforcement. Interesting, Minister. We're in a good position now, but the Charter will add all of those things. So what, they're not there now, but we're in a strong position. Okay? Moving forward, the government will be reviewing the Statistics Act to ensure Canadians can trust the way their data is handled. Last year, Statistics Canada came under fire after Global News reported the agency was seeking to obtain the personal banking information of 500,000 Canadian households, which included everything from credit card payments to account balances. The Innovation Minister said he had also written a letter to the head of the Competition Bureau to ensure he has the tools necessary to promote competition and create a healthy environment. The government will ensure fair competition in the online marketplace. We want to facilitate the growth of Canadian businesses and affirm Canada's leadership on digital and data innovation while protecting Canadian consumers from market abuses. Notice how Canadian consumers are second in that statement. The government is pledging to strengthen the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, PIPEDA, the privacy law that governs private sector corporations, in line with the Digital Charter. PIPEDA, the PIPEDA Act, has not been updated since the early 2000s and is out of date with the new digital world and global privacy laws. The government is also launching the Data Governance Standardization Collaborative, a body that will coordinate the development of data governance standards in Canada. This will help create a level playing field in the digital economy. The minister said innovation cannot happen at the expense of privacy and data and personal security. Well, details, as they are, of the digital charter come almost a week after world leaders and social media companies gathered in Paris to sign the Christchurch Call, pledging to step up efforts to prevent their platforms from being used to spread hatred, help extremist groups organize, and broadcast attacks. At that conference, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada would create the digital charter, likening the current digital landscape to the Wild West, and emphasizing the need to combat hate speech, misinformation, and online electoral interference. When asked by the National Observer how the new digital charter would police issues of data breaches and hate speech in a boundary-less digital environment, Bain said Canada recognizes we can't go it alone. We need to work with our allies and friends. Bain said he has made efforts to work with G7 to figure out areas of collaboration within the digital charter and is working with the OECD and the World Economic Forum, which has positively endorsed Canada's new charter. There's a red flag for you. We're taking a multilateral approach, working with other jurisdictions because we recognize the problem goes beyond our borders. Outstanding. The digital charter has come about after extensive consultations with Canadians, business leaders, academic experts, and members of the federal government. It reflects a government-wide approach. Several federal ministries are working together and coordinating efforts to ensure that Canada's laws are reflective of the 21st century digital economy. Remember, the digital economy is what's really important here, not your fucking rights. According to government numbers, 90% of Canadians would turn off the tap to a business that misuses their data. The new charter lays out the rules of this new game. Okay then. Now, as usual, I will now go to what the government itself says online. Now, this is at the Innovation, Science, and something else ministry website. The digital charter is there. It's, well, I think it's about 80 pages for a PDF. They do lay stuff out. I have to give them that much. There's not a lot of depth to it, but at least they tell you what the direction is, which is better than it used to be. But like I said, there's no depth, but at least it's there. And, out of 80 pages, once you take out the diagrams and the graphs, some of which are in the show page slideshow, and you take out the boilerplate that we've been seeing since the first mandate letters to cabinet ministers, you get it down to around 50 pages. Now, I'm not going to go through all 50, but I've highlighted some stuff. This is a lot better than what the minister says to the Empire Club in Toronto. Now, like I said, this is from the federal website. Canada's digital charter in action. A plan by Canadians for Canadians. Canada, fuck yeah. The minister's message. In 2016, we started a conversation with Canadians on how to foster innovation to build a stronger, more competitive Canada. Together, we developed the Innovation and Skills Plan. This plan reflects our commitment to a partnership-driven approach to build innovation ecosystems in Canada and deliver simpler, more efficient, and more coordinated supports to firms at all stages of growth and Canadians at every stage of their lives. It is with the same mindset that we move forward on how to make Canada a leader in today's data-driven, digital, global economy. Data is a powerful tool. It has the potential to drive groundbreaking research and innovation, supporting robotics, AI, and the Internet of Things. There are, however, real concerns amongst Canadians about how personal data could be used and that measures are in place that protect Canadians' privacy and security. Simply put, The way forward on data collection, management, and use must be built on a strong foundation of trust and transparency between citizens, companies, and government. Trust, not laws, eh? Interesting. We are living in an age that is in many ways defined by the rapid acceleration and convergence of disruptive technologies. These technologies are now an integral part of Canadians' everyday lives. From GPS to mobile banking to social media, digital technologies are revolutionizing the way Canadians access information, shop, live, socialize, and work. People are creating more data than ever before, spanning a wide range of industries, which if harnessed can be used to advance human knowledge and understanding, improving the ability to analyze challenges, deliver meaningful user-driven services, and increase productivity and efficiency. Anybody else get the translation of that? Advancements in areas including robotics, AI, quantum computing, and nanotechnology are leading to groundbreaking discoveries with significant economic and social benefits. But while these technological achievements are in many ways enriching society, this transformation also brings with it challenges and uncertainty that Canada must be prepared to address. Embracing digital and data-driven technologies provides an opportunity to push the boundaries of what is possible. It also means Canada needs a cohesive vision for its digital future that builds on the country's strengths, is flexible and nimble in reducing barriers to innovation, encourages a thriving and secure innovation-based marketplace, and ushers in a new era of Canadian global competitiveness. Oh, jolly good. Pip, pip. Still, they're backing up their whole effort here. This is a government website. On June 19th, 2018, Minister Baines officially launched the National Digital and Data Consultations with the goal of better understanding how Canada can drive digital innovation, prepare Canadians for the future of work, and ensure they have trust and confidence in how their data is used. Note again that the rights of the people are number 3. Over the following 4-month period, Canadians from coast to coast, he's only got 2 coasts, shared their insights and ideas on digital and data transformation and what Canada can do to harness its power for the benefit of all. This includes more than 1,950 written responses received through the consultation website and other digital platforms. Minister Baines conducted a series of roundtable discussions with Canadians. Gee, good plan. So did 6 respected digital innovation leaders appointed by the minister to engage on this important matter. Together, 30 discussions took place across the country between June and September 2018. The leaders reached out to a broad cross-section of society, including, surprise, surprise, business leaders, innovators and entrepreneurs, academia, women, youth, Indigenous peoples, provincial, territorial governments, and all Canadians. Yay, Canadians. Okay, what did they get out of these engagements? What Canadians said. They're not broken down anymore, they're just Canadians. Through this engagement process, Canadians came together to share their vision for a competitive, inclusive, digital and data-driven Canada in 3 areas. 1, skills and talent, preparing for the workplace of the future. Unleashing innovation, supporting growth of competitive Canadian companies. And again, at the bottom, number 3, privacy and trust, making Canada a leader in the digital age. Now, there's certainly a lot of poppycock in these sections. I'm really not going to go into anything on the first 2 because it's just the same rah-rah business, let's go, same old shit. But number 3, privacy and trust. Supporting innovation, protecting privacy interests, and promoting trust when it comes to data. The issue: digital and data transformation has led to an explosion of data, with a large proportion of the world's data created in the last few years. Data is helping to fuel innovations like AI, machine learning, and the Internet of Things. However, the rapid acceleration of data being created and its use as a commodity means Canada must reevaluate the frameworks it has in place. While the PIPEDA Act and other marketplace frameworks continue to provide important protections, particularly as they were situated as technologically neutral in orientation, there remains important questions about how to ensure these frameworks are transparent and have the appropriate approach to maintain Canadians' privacy and trust in an increasingly data-driven world. What is clear is that Canadians want more transparency in how their data is being collected and how it is being used. Current consent-based models with complex and lengthy privacy policies are inadequate and do not help to build trust. People also want greater control over their personal data and flexible options such as portability that allows citizens to transfer their data in order to fuel choice and competition. A commitment to privacy and maintaining trust must be a fundamental principle of any approach to data management for both private and public entities, and should be built into the design of digital systems from their inception. Recognizing that not all data is created equal, and there is no one-size-fits-all model for data, we heard that different approaches to data management should be considered that all respect Canada's core values, including a right to privacy. It is important that any mechanism ensures openness and transparency and instills the importance of engaging the consumer to instill confidence and maximize the innovative possibilities. Access to data can have great value to individuals and Canada as a whole. Ultimately, Canadians need to be equipped with the appropriate information, tools, and digital literacy skills required to weigh the benefits and risks in order to make an informed decision. Well, sounds all high and mighty down it, doesn't it? But what does it really say? Caveat emptor? Canadians told us that the current privacy legislation, PIPEDA, needs to be modernized and streamlined. However, the government must ensure that updates both support innovation and protect Canadians. Rules must be supported by clear guidance on implementation and applicability, and must consider effective and appropriate enforcement measures to hold players accountable and ensure Canadians have confidence and trust in these protections. Effective enforcement must also include ease of understanding and compliance, strong advocacy, and a commitment to due process in order to not add undue burden and costs to firms. See that? To firms. Doesn't say anything about cost to Canadians. We also heard that updates must consider emerging privacy norms, particularly internationally, and work coherently across other important marketplace frameworks, including competition and intellectual property, as well as emerging regulations for particular disruptive technologies and business models, such as blockchain or open banking. The government considers blockchain a disruptive technology. Remember that. The government must consider the accelerated pace at which the technological ecosystem evolves and ensure that measures are agile and flexible enough to remain responsive. And it is important to continue working proactively and in partnership with industry, well, of course, to ensure benefits for both businesses and citizens are optimized. Oh yeah, I bet. I don't see anything where it says you must remain with a citizens panel or anything. Keep talking to industry, though. Canadians told us that digital threats, including security breaches, data misuse and manipulation, malware, to name a few, help to underscore the importance of strong cybersecurity measures for businesses and citizens. Oh, yay! Many small, medium enterprises, particularly in non-tech sectors, might not realize they need to consider cybersecurity until it is too late. We heard that greater awareness is needed on how to protect Canadians from threats. Businesses must be supported to build both capacity to implement cybersecurity measures and knowledge of its importance, including leveraging relationships across the supply chain. So if you have government contracts and you don't have suitable IT infrastructure, it's starting to sound to me like the government will pick up that tab for you. Cybersecurity is also a large industry in and of itself. No shit. Canada has an opportunity to better understand threats and use its reputation as a stable and trusted nation to welcome sector investment. Yeah, okay. Young Canadians also feel that privacy and trust are critical to our democracy and essential for ensuring full participation in the digital economy. While data has great value and benefits, Canada must have greater transparency around privacy agreements, what it means to give consent, and how data is being used. Canada must also ensure our democratic institutions are not undermined by the spreading of false information. Finally, young Canadians worry about what digital and data transformation will mean for the future of work and their prospects for stable jobs and secure benefits. Canada has the right ingredients to thrive in an increasingly digital world, including a strong capacity for research, a diverse and highly educated workforce, and a robust investment climate. Canadians are tech-savvy and well-connected, with 89% of people and 98% of businesses connected to the Internet. 88% of Canadians have a mobile device. On average, 18 to 34-year-old Canadians spend 5 hours a day on the Internet. And through targeted investments in science, innovation, and sustainable growth, Canada has built a strong economic foundation. However, the country also faces some challenges. Canadian businesses are poised to leverage digital and data-driven technologies in order to increase efficiency and productivity to stimulate growth and competitiveness. Right. That's 21st century Reaganomics. Yet Canadian technology adoption and investment lags behind other countries. There have been great strides through targeted investment to bridge the digital divide in Canada. But due to its large and unique geography, there are still those who lack access to high-speed, affordable digital services, particularly in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. Canadians also have real concerns about trust and security. For example, data breaches have raised questions and public concern around data ownership and how it's collected, used, and protected. Cybercrime, including malware and fraud, is dangerous and estimated to cost the world $6 trillion US annually by 2021. Half of the global population is online. There are 5 billion global mobile devices, and there are 2 billion Facebook monthly users. Global e-commerce has increased almost fourfold from $495 billion US in 2005 to $1.9 trillion in 2016. By 2035, 5G wireless technology projected to enable $12.3 trillion of global economic output. What about new marketplaces? The global autonomous cars, driverless cars market is projected to reach a value of approximately $1.5 trillion. AI is expected to deliver around $13 trillion in additional economic output by 2030. Wow, that's a lot of spooks. Wow. This is why the government is undertaking a principled approach that will guide future thinking and actions to ensure they are aligned with the values that are important to Canadians. These principles are the foundation for a coordinated Made in Canada approach that will guide our policy thinking and actions and will help to build an innovative, people-centered, and inclusive digital and data economy. These principles are also aligned with work of other international partners and organizations. Surprise, surprise! Such as the principles put forth by the OECD as part of their Going Digital project to support the development of and implementation of digital government strategies to bring governments closer to citizens and businesses, figure, and G7 international efforts on artificial intelligence. The government asked Canadians to share their ideas and insights on how Canada can foster this economy, and they responded loud and clear. The following draft 10 principles will help guide the federal government's work, serving as a digital charter for Canadians to help address challenges and leverage Canada's unique talents and strengths. These principles reflect what we heard from Canadians and are the building blocks of a foundation of trust for the digital age. Now remember, before we were talking about who actually responded, everybody got broken down. Indigenous, women, youth, everything, all separate. But now that we're looking at the results that they wish to present to us, everybody's just Canadians, including businesses. So who are we really hearing from when they say Canadians? One example of how the government is advancing these principles is a commitment to examine the viability of certain changes to PIPEDA to ensure that it continues to meet its stated purpose of maintaining trust and confidence in the marketplace. Building on changes already made, such as new mandatory breach reporting regulations, the government will engage with stakeholders on issues such as consent, enforcement, online reputation, transparency, and data mobility. Oh yeah, by the way, we'll keep talking to Canadians too, don't worry about it. At the very end of this, we get a tip of the hat to the Christchurch Call. Canada recently signed the Christchurch Call to Action, a global pledge to eradicate terrorist and violent extremist content online, led by New Zealand and France. Through the call to action, governments and major online service providers have made voluntary, collective commitments to prevent people from abusing the internet for violent, extremist, and terrorist purposes. So again, we're starting to see the same things pasted into everything. The government recognizes the need to promote greater understanding and openness, so Canadians are better equipped to make decisions on how and when their personal data is collected and used, and to create an environment that holds those who break the rules accountable for their actions. New mandatory breach reporting regulations are now in place in Canada, reinforcing organizations' responsibilities to come clean about significant breaches that affect consumers. Under these new rules, companies will have to inform Canadians if their private information has been lost or stolen, and if they have been placed at risk of harm. Companies also have to report these breaches to the Privacy Commissioner of Canada and maintain records of all data breaches for at least 2 years. These regulations will provide Canadians with the information they need to protect themselves and will encourage stronger information security practices on the part of organizations who handle the personal information of Canadians. In a June 2018 government response to recommendations made in a parliamentary report on PIPEDA, the government committed to reforming the Act. Through release of a discussion paper, the government will examine the viability of certain proposed changes to PIPEDA to ensure that it can continue to meet its stated purpose. They will. Building on recent changes, that paper will frame discussions with stakeholders on issues such as consent, enforcement, online reputation, transparency, and data mobility. Yeah, we know. To this end, the paper proposes that individuals should be provided plain language information about the handling of their personal information, including when automated decision-making is used. The discussion paper will specifically examine, not has or is specifically examining, will, how introducing data mobility requirements within the legislation could support greater individual control over data and promote consumer choice. This has the potential to create and grow entirely new and innovative goods and services. It looks to strengthen enforcement mechanisms, including enhanced penalties that support compliance. They're committed to looking at everything. Oh yeah, right at the very end of this section. This also includes looking at the results or reviews of the Telecommunications Act, the Broadcasting Act, and the Radio Communication Act. Yeah, study. The conclusion on the official government digital media spiel. This is a pivotal time in history where harnessing technological advancements is no longer just a competitive advantage. It is a necessity for prosperity. Canada has the potential to be at the forefront of digital and data transformation, but without real action, there is a risk of falling behind. Positioning Canada as a world leader in today's digital and data-driven economy requires a national collaborative effort across all sectors and stakeholders. Yeah. So, of course, don't even question what we're doing. We're right. We're noble. Look at this. Dun, 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 dun. Now, the 10 principles that all these discussions got out of it that are in the charter is in another little separate page. The 10 principles are universal access, safety and security, control and consent, transparency, portability, and interoperability, open and modern digital government, a level playing field. Yeah, I'm sure the citizens of Canada made sure that got in there. Data and digital for good, strong democracy, free from hate and violent extremism, and strong enforcement and real accountability. So those are apparently the 10 principles that this is going to move forward on. Remember, they're just phrases. There's nothing behind them. Is it more than other countries have done? Yeah. There's no doubt about that. Is there perhaps different parties in Canada? If they were government, we wouldn't even be seeing this? Yeah, that's definitely possible. If one of those parties happens to create government after October, you think this is going to go away? Yeah, it probably will. Unless something will come out that's rubber stamp regulated, order in council, these corporations are going to run the show. That's always possible with those other guys. We've seen that before. That concept is what got us on the road to Phoenix. So that's always possible. But could Canada be doing more? Oh yeah, definitely. But the one thing I will say is I will recognize that this environment changes so fast. You're talking about a federal government. That's not their pace, Sorry. But they're making a big deal of it. We'll see if it's an issue going forward. We'll see how the implementation of C-76 and the election integrity thing goes. That's also related. Not directly, because, that's what they're saying they stand for, what the Christchurch Call and the Canada's Digital Charter is a lot tighter than how Bill C-76 turned out, which is now law, and how this election will be run. So, we'll see. There's a lot of talk, but there's no depth. These 30 roundtable discussions, like, whoop-de-doo, man. That doesn't mean much. It's really no different than the CRTC dog and pony shows, or the National Energy Board. Same thing. And this Liberal government is very efficient at consultation, unless they know they can't win, then they just don't have any consultations. But, that's just par for the course. But you notice the focus, even in the Christchurch Call, even with Canada's digital charter, without a doubt, nothing can happen without the providers. Nothing can happen without big data. There's just no way. We just can't tell them what to do. Maybe the reason for that is because the Valley, Silicon Valley, is going to be given the chance to come up with their own system. I'm sure that'll work out fine, right? Who's heard of the Trust Project? More people need to be aware of what the Trust Project is. Well, I'm just taking a second here. Got to check Twitter's. Once you get to 20 notifications, it's like, okay, take a look. Okay, whoop-de-doo. The Trust Project, as I said in the opening, is funded and controlled by big data and friends. That's it. This has been picking up steam for over 2 years now. Seriously. It started as an idea almost a decade ago. But, Facebook was unaware they have problems apparently last year. But I'm going to turn to an article from The Atlantic from May 25th of 2017. And this is written by the head of the Trust Project, Sally Lehrman. This was the trial balloon for the Trust Project to the public. Things are already well underway within Silicon Valley and elsewhere. But for the public, this was the big trial balloon. What people really want from news organizations. Pundits complain that people are satisfied with the echo chambers they're in. But that's not quite right. Journalism has been struggling to stay afloat in an era when people expect information to come both fast and free. Now, competition by principle-free enterprises further undermines its very role and purpose as an engine for democracy. The digital world has muddied formerly clear divisions between factual news, sales pitches, hoaxes, and hyper-partisan propaganda designed to incite. On social media and in online search, misinformation spreads with lightning speed. Lurid headlines loom far larger than the logos of news brands, which at least offer a clue to the origin of information and the care behind it. To make collective decisions about our communities, our shared resources, and our government, we have to agree on basic facts. Today, those facts can take on the shape of a funhouse mirror, where we each see a distorted image tailored to our own expectations. The Trust Project, which is a collaboration of news organizations around the world, aims to sharpen the picture by using technology to encourage accurate, ethically produced news and make it easy to find. Think along the lines of a nutrition label on a package of food, or a lab report that conveys your health status when you go in for a checkup. Interesting metaphors. Based at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics in Santa Clara, California, the project has brought together more than 70 news organizations to work on a transparency system that would show how a story came to be and who stands behind it. Technology companies, which have become powerful distributors of news, are also contributing their expertise and a strong willingness to apply the results. Imagine you encountered a piece of text or video in your social media newsfeed or while searching for news on your phone or computer. It would be marked clearly as news, opinion, or sponsored content designed to sell you something. If you clicked on the byline, you'd see the author's background and other published work. Did that person have local expertise experience and knowledge covering the topic. Another click would take you to information about the news site itself. What commitments has it made to ethics, diversity, and correcting mistakes? Who owns or funds the site? Who's the leadership? And when was it created? For investigative or more controversial stories, you could see citations backing up the information presented and a short description of the reporting involved. If you liked, you could learn details about the site's track record for reaching across economic background, race, age, gender, and other differences to get the full story. You'd quickly find what you needed to make informed choices about your news. The trust indicators would also send machine-readable signals to Facebook, Google, Bing, Twitter, and other technology platforms. We're already working with these 4 companies, all of which have said they want to use our indicators to prioritize honest, well-reported news over fakery and falsehood. While some news organizations show bits and pieces of these features, until now they have not been standardized and structured across sites for the public to quickly find or platform machines to read. The journalists working on this project aren't attempting to prescribe the perfect news diet for the public. That would be self-serving. Oh, pompous and dull. Oh, indeed, wouldn't it? No, we're asking people to tell us what they want and need from the news. Well, isn't that interesting? No, we're going to let you tell us. Well, yeah, maximize your monetization, for Christ's sake. We have conducted interviews with consumers across the United States and Europe. Our questions: what do you value in news? When do you trust it? When have you had your trust broken? Pundits complain about a naive public that likes cat videos and bias-confirming memes. Our interviews turned up something different. Thoughtful online readers who genuinely want to be informed about where their own communities... Sorry about that. Thoughtful online readers who genuinely want to be informed about their own communities and the world. Skeptical citizens who work very hard to gather a more complete, nuanced picture of issues and events than they believe news organizations typically provide. Some members of the public are frustrated with journalism that seems thin, uninformed, biased against their community, and replete with argument, anger, and violence. They complain about opinion presented exactly like news. Some people are so fed up that they have simply disengaged. They want more humility from journalists, more recognition that in spite of journalists' best aspirations, they do sometimes get it wrong. Most of the people we talked to, though, valued the news and the people who produce it. Our interviewees told us that they knew journalists aspire to be objective, but we all have a perspective based on our life experiences. They wanted news organizations to be clear about their funding sources and agenda. They wanted to know more about the reporter and where they got their information. They wanted to hear from people like themselves and unlike themselves, certainly more than the usual high-powered leaders in business and government. Many talked about more engagement. A news story, we heard, should offer tools like annotation and forms that would allow readers to contest claims, suggest more sources, and propose ideas for reporting further. Yeah, it's called fucking Reddit. Journalists, people urged, should be more collaborative with the public they aim to serve. Stupid comment. Journalism executives listen eagerly to these insights, but don't always like what they hear. All that transparency may stretch their technology systems and eat up precious time. So far, however, many are still game to try. The Washington Post, the Daily Mirror, and the Globe and Mail are in the early stages of rolling out our indicators, while many other organizations in the US and Europe are preparing to do so. Technology platforms are mulling the best ways to apply the signals in their own environments. I hope they'll all recognize the opportunity to become more relevant and responsive. A vibrant, free press that the public can trust is vital to democracy. Bravo. Oh, yeah. Well, now I turn to the Nieman Lab at niemanlab.org. This is from Laura Azard-Owen. This is from November 16th, 2017. So, it's about 6 months after the little trial balloon. The Trust Project brings news orgs and tech giants together to tag and surface high-quality news. The hope is that if news organizations are more clear and transparent about what they're doing, then users can make their own decisions. Will readers trust the news more if they have more information about who's behind it? It's worth a try. We mark the launch of the Trust Project, an initiative 3 years in the making that brings together news outlets such as the Washington Post, the Economist, and the Globe and Mail, as well as Facebook, Google, Twitter, and Bing, in a commitment to provide clarity on the news organization's ethics and other standards, the journalists' backgrounds, and how they do their work. The project will standardize this method of increased clarity so that news organizations, large and small, around the world can use it, and so that the algorithms of the tech giants can find and incorporate it. The public can look at this and say, okay, I know more about what's behind this organization, said Sally Lehrman, Senior Director of Journalism Ethics at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University, and the creator of the project, which is funded by the Craig Newmark Philanthropic Fund, Google, the Knight Foundation, the Democracy Fund, and the Markkula Foundation. Hopefully, it will pull back the curtain on some of our practices as journalists, which, in fact, a lot of people don't know about. And this lack of transparency is partly what creates a sense of suspicion. A team of representatives from dozens of media companies worldwide came up with 8 core indicators. Best practices. What are your standards? Who funds the news outlet? What is the outlet's mission? Plus commitments to ethics, diverse voices, accuracy, making corrections, and other standards. Author expertise. Who reported this? Details about the journalist who wrote the story, including expertise and other stories they have worked on. Type of work. What is this? Labels to distinguish opinion, analysis, and advertiser or sponsored content from news reports. Citations and references. For investigative or in-depth stories, greater access to the sources behind the facts and assertions. Methods. Also for in-depth stories, information about why reporters chose to pursue a story and how they went about the process. Is it locally sourced? Lets people know when the story has local origin or expertise. Diverse voices. A newsroom's efforts to bring in diverse perspectives. And actionable feedback. A newsroom's efforts to engage the public's help in setting coverage priorities, contributing to the reporting process, ensuring accuracy, and other areas. Now, the Trust Project has worked with schema.org to create a standardized technical language for the tags to the content under the Trust Project so that the tech sites can incorporate them. The first wave of publishers going live with the Trust Indicators include the Washington Post, the Independent Journal Review, the Globe and Mail, the Economist, Trinity Mirror, the German press agency DPA, and Italy's La Repubblica and La Stampa. Lehrman sought out these organizations to be first because those are the ones I knew had the technical capabilities to be the demonstrators. I also aim to experiment with how this would work across different types of media. The integration of the standard is a heavy technical lift. It needs to be incorporated into publishers' CMSs and site code. There's also a Trello board out there with links on how the indicators are being incorporated onto various parts of participating publisher sites, from about pages to author bios to citations and references. The second wave will probably include a similar number of publishers. The Trust Project also worked with the Institute for Nonprofit News to develop a WordPress plugin that allows qualified publishers to incorporate the indicators into their sites. Eventually, the project will begin scaling more ambitiously. Oh yeah, I bet they will. The costs will lessen over time. I'm thinking a lot about how to ease the path for newsrooms that don't have the kinds of resources that this first phase of newsrooms does. There's also, of course, the tech companies. Facebook, Google, Bing, and Twitter partnered with the Trust Project early on and will be incorporating the trust indicators into their products in various ways. Partnering with the Trust Project since its conception has been important to Google, in large part because we believe the indicators can help our algorithms better understand authoritative journalism and help us to better surface it to consumers. Notice they don't use promote anymore, they surface. This was said by Richard Gingras, Vice President of News Products at Google. We hope to use the type of work indicator to improve the accuracy of article labels in Google News and indicators such as best practices and author info into our knowledge panels. Facebook, meanwhile, will be displaying the trust indicators via the article context feature it launched in October 2018. For now, Facebook's buy-in appears experimental and limited. Nobody is saying that they'll favor Trust Project partners in their algorithms or anything like that. You're not going to see sudden changes with the algorithm. Well, that's a misleading statement. They don't need sudden changes. The Trust Project is explicitly nonpartisan. The Independent Journal Review is the most conservative launch partner. But overall, the project is meant to be a consortium of news organizations that adhere to traditional standards. Lehman says the idea is that news organizations are providing information about how they go about their work, who funds them, and what their mission is in terms of coverage. The hope is that if news organizations are more clear and transparent about what they're doing, then users can make their own decisions. There are bound to be naysayers, fake news criers, and both readers and sites that regard the appearance of the Trust Project's logo as, in fact, a sign that an outlet should not be trusted. But Lehrman, the project will make inroads. The Center for Media Engagement at the University of Texas, Austin, has been testing news consumers' reaction to the trust indicators over the past few months. And though the full results haven't yet been released, the trust indicators did create a statistically significant shift in attitude about whether the site was trustworthy. So here they are. They've broken out. And again, that was from November 16th, 2017. Now we go to October 9th, 2018. BusinessWire.com. In a concerted fight against online misinformation, 20 leading news organizations have joined the Trust Project's efforts to increase transparency and trust in the news media, extending the reach of the global network's trust indicators to 217 million people a month. As a result of this major expansion, today more than 120 news sites around the world are showing the public the project's trust indicators. The first transparency standard for news that helps people easily recognize the commitments and expertise behind trustworthy journalism. Like nutritional labels, the trust indicators are offered by newsrooms to provide clarity on who and what is behind a news story so that people can easily assess whether it comes from a credible source. Research, both live and in experimental settings, has found that the trust indicators meet user needs. Across 2 surveys, Reach plc UK found that trust in its flagship outlet, The Mirror, jumped 8% after it added the trust indicators to its site. An experiment at UT Austin's Center for Media Engagement found higher evaluations of a news organization's reputation when the trust indicators were present. Adding to Trust Project's momentum are new users of the trust indicators by partners in the technology sector. Now it's Google, Bing, Facebook, Nuzzle, PEN America, and NewsGuard are using them to surface, display, or better label journalism on their platforms. Notice the word promote's not there anymore. The trust indicators are gaining traction as the global industry standard for transparency among newsrooms and beyond, said again by Ms. Lehrman. The U.S. elections drew into sharp relief a global issue. The need for credible, honest, and accurate news is more urgent than ever. Now with the Trust Project's growth, millions of people can use the trust indicators and feel secure they can recognize the trustworthy stories that journalists produce every day. Isn't it interesting what happened over the year between these 2 articles? You know, we're all about fair content and, logical discourse. But a year later, it's like, be afraid. We tell the truth. Well, what trust indicator was ethics again? Richard Gingras is still vice president of news at Google. And at this point in time, he said, we're pleased to see hundreds of news sites move forward with the trust indicators. Transparency is important to building trust, and trust is important to building engagement. It is gratifying to see the research prove these points. The trust indicators are valuable to assess the relative authoritativeness of news organizations and authors. We're looking forward to developing new ways to use the indicators. Oh, I bet you are. Facebook seems to be more on board now, probably because they're getting so much heat. The additional news partners more than double the number of existing news organizations implementing the trust indicators. In the United States and Canada, the trust indicators can now be seen on sites hosted by Bay Area News Group, CBC News, Heavy.com, the Toronto Star, Tegna, Voice of Orange County, the Walrus, and the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism. And in Europe, on those of Corriere della Sera, El País in Spain, Il Sole, I can't say 24 in Italian, 24 Ore, Kathimerini, Greece, Orb Media, which is international, SciDev.net, international, and Sky News in the UK. Companies in the process of joining include Canadian Press, Frontline PBS, El Mundo in Spain, Star Tribune, and Zeit Online in Germany. So they are attracting the heavyweights. And, gee, I wonder why. Well, when you're adding code to news stories that gets surfaced, gee, I wonder. Join the club, pay to play. Now I go back to Neiman Lab. Again, Laura Azard-Owen. The Trust Project adds another batch of sites to its effort to increase news transparency. Now again, this is, what is this? This is the same day as the previous article from Business Wire. The Trust Project, which launched in November of 2017, is an effort to provide more clarity around who's behind news by labeling articles with indicators, announced that it's added a bunch of new publishing partners. Now, the only thing I'm going to add from this article that I haven't already gone over is this one paragraph. The data about whether this kind of thing actually works to increase people's trust in the news and whether that broad trust can actually be increased at all is somewhat sketchy and conflicting. The Trust Project has supported some research that found that higher evaluations of a news organization's reputation, including its trustworthiness and reliability, when the trust indicators were present. Other research, however, suggests that community ratings can backfire, that linking to sources doesn't always work, and that people don't look at sources as much as you think when they're trying to determine the credibility of something. It's yet to be determined whether the Trust Project is an actual game changer or just a news organization feel-good measure. Well, there's a hint of a direction we haven't heard yet in anything that I've talked about the Trust Project. Well, now, do you think that's the way it's going to stay? June 7th, 2019, Mint Press News, Whitney Webb. The Trust Project, Big Media and Silicon Valley's weaponized algorithms silence dissent. This is a good article, and this covers everything that the quote-unquote Trust Project doesn't seem to get asked questions about from press organizations who want to be in the whatever. You get the picture. After the failure of NewsGuard, the news rating system backed by a cadre of prominent neoconservative personalities, to gain traction among American tech and social media companies, what's going on here? Hello? Hello? Oh, shit. What's happening? Hello? Well, I'm not even sure if this is going out because I'm not seeing any levels. So, wow. Oh, I hate this, how this is just so ridiculous between Blog Talk Radio and Windows fighting over who has control of volume levels and stuff. Oh, man, what a pain in the ass. James, I know you're listening. If you can still hear me, tweet it. Because I'm really freaked out now because I don't see any levels. But yet the call is still connected. I have no idea. And I hear system sounds. So, I mean, that ain't it. And I ain't muted. I have no idea. Though different from NewsGuard, this group, known as the Trust Project, has a similar goal of restoring trust in corporate mainstream media outlets relative to independent alternatives by applying trust indicators to social media news algorithms in a decidedly untransparent way. The funding of the Trust Project, coming largely from big tech companies like Google, government-connected tech oligarchs like Pierre Omidyar, and the Knight Foundation, a key NewsGuard investor, suggests that an ulterior motive in its tireless promotion of traditional mainstream media outlets is to limit the success of dissenting alternatives. Of particular importance is the fact that the Trust Project's trust indicators are already being used to control what news is promoted and suppressed by top search engines like Google and Bing and massive social media networks like Facebook. Though the descriptions of these trust indicators, 8 of which are currently in use, are publicly available, the way they are being used by major tech and social media companies is not. The Trust Project's goal is to increase public trust in the very same traditional media outlets that NewsGuard favored, and to use HTML embedded codes in favored news articles to promote their content at the expense of independent alternatives. Even if its effort to promote trust in establishment media fail, its embedded code hidden within participating news sites allow these establishment outlets to skirt the same algorithms currently targeting their independent competition, making such issues of trust largely irrelevant as it moves to homogenize the online media landscape in favor of mainstream media. Now, the Trust Project's director, Sally Lehrman, made it clear that, in her view, the lack of public trust in mainstream media and its declining readership is the result of unwanted competition by principle-free enterprises that further undermines journalism's very role and purpose as an engine for democracy. The Trust Project describes itself as a consortium of top news companies involved in developing transparency standards that help you easily assess the quality and credibility of journalism. It has done this by creating what it calls trust indicators, which the project's website describes as a digital standard that meets people's needs. Do you remember from the Digital Charter, Minister Baines talking about the Digital Charter is what meets people's needs? However, far from meeting people's needs, the trust indicators seem aimed at manipulating search engine and social media news algorithms to the benefit of the project's media partners, rather than to the benefit of the general public. Okay, good. Right on. Thanks, James. The origins of the Trust Project date back to a 2012 roundtable hosted by the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics at Santa Clara University, a center funded by former Apple CEO Mark Markkula. That roundtable became known as the Roundtable on Digital Journalism Ethics and was created by then journalist Sally Lehrman in connection with the New Media Executive Roundtable and Online Credibility Watch of the Society of Professional Journalists. Now, Lehrman has explicitly stated that the Trust Project is open only to news organizations that adhere to traditional standards. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean you have to have printing presses? Like, what does that mean? The specific idea that spurred the creation of the Trust Project itself was born at a 2014 meeting when Lehrman asked a specialist in machine learning at Twitter and Richard Gingras, head of Google News, if algorithms could be used to support ethics instead of hurting them. And they said yes. Gingras agreed to collaborate. In other words, the idea behind the Trust Project from the start was aimed at gaming search engine and social media algorithms in collusion with major tech companies like Google and Twitter. As the Trust Project itself notes, the means of altering algorithms were developed in tandem with tech giant executives like Gingras and top editors in the industry from 80 news outlets and institutions, all of which are corporate, mainstream media outlets. Notably, the Trust Project's media partners involved in creating these new standards for news algorithms include major publications owned by wealthy oligarchs, the Washington Post, owned by the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, The Economist, directed by the wealthy Rothschild family, and the Globe and Mail, owned by Canada's richest family, the Thompsons. Other Trust Project partners include the New York Times, Hearst Television, the BBC, and the USA Today Network. Other major outlets are represented on the News Leadership Council of the Markkula Center, including the Financial Times, Gizmodo Media, and the Wall Street Journal. That council, which also includes Mr. Gingras and Andrew Anker, Facebook's Director of Product Management, guides the Trust Project on our trust indicators. Now, these indicators are the core of the Trust Project's activities and reveal one of the key mechanisms through which Google, Twitter, and Facebook have been altering their algorithms to favor outlets with good trust indicator scores. Trust indicators on their face are aimed at making news publications more transparent as a means of generating increased trust with the public. Though a total of 37 have been developed, it appears only 8 of them are currently being used. How the Trust Project makes these indicators available to the public can be seen in its new project, the Newsroom Transparency Tracker, where it provides a table of transparency for participating media outlets. Notably, that table conflates actual transparency practices with simply providing the Trust Project with outlet policies and guidelines related to the above indicators. That was me muting a sneeze. For example, The Economist gets a perfect transparency score for having provided the Trust Project links to its ethics policy, mission statement, and other information requested by the project. However, the fact that these policies exist and are provided to the Trust Project does not mean that the publication's policies are, in fact, transparent or ethical in terms of their content or in practice. The fact that The Economist provided links to its policies does not make the publication more transparent. But in the context of the Newsroom Transparency Tracker's table, it provides the appearance of transparency. Though such policy disclosures by The Economist are unlikely to translate into any changes to its well-known biases and slanted reporting towards certain issues, the true power of the trust indicators comes in a form that is not visible to the general public. These trust indicators, while occasionally displayed on partner websites, are also coupled with machine-readable signals embedded in the HTML code of participating websites and articles used by Facebook, Google, Bing, and Twitter. Now, as Lehrman noted in a 2017 article, the Trust Project was then already working with these 4 companies, all of which have said they want to use our indicators to prioritize honest, well-reported news over fakery and falsehood. Gingras of Google News also noted that the trust indicators are used by Google as cues to help search engines better understand and rank results, and to help the myriad algorithmic systems that mold our media lives. Just consider the weight of that statement. People no longer control what you listen to. A press release from the Trust Project in 2018 further underscores the importance of the embedded indicators to alter social media and search engine algorithms. Despite claiming to increase public knowledge of news sites' commitments to transparency, the way that major tech companies like Google and Facebook are using these indicators is anything but transparent. Indeed, it is largely unknown how these indicators are used, though there are a few clues. For instance, CBS News cited Craig Newmark, the billionaire founder of Craigslist, who provided the Trust Project seed funding, as suggesting that Google's search algorithm could rank trusted sources above others in search results by using the project's trust indicators. Last year, the Trust Project stated that Bing used the type of work trust indicator to display whether an article is news, opinion, or analysis. It also stated that when Facebook launched its process to index news pages, they worked with the Trust Project to make it easy for any publisher to add optional information about their page. In Google's case, Gingras was quoted as saying that Google News uses the indicators to assess the relative authoritativeness of news organizations and authors. We're looking forward to developing new ways to use the indicators. Oh, I bet you are. Notably, the machine-readable version of these trust indicators is available only to participating institutions, which are currently corporate, mainstream publications. Though WordPress and Drupal plugins are being developed, to make those embedded signals to search engines and social media available to smaller publishers. It will be made available only to qualified publishers, a determination that will presumably be made by the Trust Project. Richard Gingras, in a statement made in 2017, noted that the indicators can help our algorithms better understand authoritative journalism and help us to better surface it to consumers. Thus, it is abundantly clear that these indicators, which are embedded only into qualified and authoritative news websites, will be used to slant search engine and social media news algorithms in favor of establishment news websites. The bottom line is that these embedded and exclusive indicators allow certain news outlets to avoid the crushing effects of recent algorithm changes that have seen traffic to many news websites, including Mint Press, plummet in recent years. This is leading towards a homogenization of the online news landscape by starving independent competitors of web traffic, while Trust Project approved outlets are given an escape valve through algorithm manipulation. Who are the people with money in the Trust Project? I'll try and get through a few of them. Well, Craig Newmark was mentioned. Now, Craig Newmark has many ties between media, tech, and just being a rich son of a bitch. He sits on the board of the EFF. He's a longtime recipient of massive grants from the Omidyar Network. He's involved with PolitiFact.com, which is funded in part by Omidyar's Democracy Fund. Mr. Newmark is currently working with Vivian Schiller as his strategic advisor in his media investments. Schiller is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Always nice to know somebody in the CFR. She's the former head of news at Twitter and a veteran of well-known mainstream outlets like NPR, CNN, New York Times, and NBC. She's also a director of the Scott Trust, which owns The Guardian. Wow. Let's see if there's anything else here. No, not going to bother with that. Not going to bother with that. This is just all shitting on the people with the money. I mean, it's a great article. I thank you for the article, Whitney Webb, but I'm not going to read all this out loud. And I will say publicly that if you do not read Mint Press News, you're missing out on an outstanding point of view on most things in the world. But that last article, I mean, look at what we went through tonight. We have the Christchurch Call. Everything's voluntary, and we're going to need industry's help. And we have these goals. Then we look at Canada's digital charter. Same goals, same involvement, same catchphrases. And then, oh, look, here's the Trust Project. Gee, it looks like they're handling things. Is it now? I mean, SEO manipulation, anybody with, a dev API key that can see the algorithmic charges, that's a massive advantage. And what's it about? It's about money. What else? It's about money. They want to lock out the little guys to tell the truth. For Canadians, where's Tyee in theirs? Where's iPolitics? Where's the National Observer? The Walrus is on board, but considering their history, that shouldn't really be a surprise. But there's so many others left out. And throughout the U.S. as well, throughout Europe as well. Does it sound like they're going to get let in from what Ms. Lerman says? Forget it. It's not happening. Progress or avoidance? Progress for people? No, it's not happening. Avoidance to eliminate the issue? Yes. Progress on advancing the issue, on complete universal monetization and control? Yeah, there's progress there. I thought this was about stopping terrorist content. How did it get to this? There's a lot more to things than they appear, I'm afraid. But hey, we all knew that, right? That's it for tonight. So, I mean, that is my verdict. The stuff is not helping, not the way it's being sold. There's no depth to it. The depth there is, they hide and call it the Trust Project. Algorithmic control has made social media the fucking cesspool it is now. You think algorithms are going to help it clean up? As was said in one of the articles going through it, you want to control that stuff, you need human eyes on it that look at the context and the circumstances. Algorithms don't do that, and algorithms don't care. Good luck to the independents. I support them. If you want to avoid this Trust Project garbage coming across your social media feeds, there's one way you can defeat it, and that's block the outlets who are carrying this garbage. If you use a search engine, you may see them again, but you're not going to see it on your timeline. Thank you for listening to The View Up Here this week. What's next week? I have no friggin' idea, like I ever do. But that's it for tonight. Christchurch Call, Digital Chart and the Trust Project, Progress or Avoidance. You make the call. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next week. Good night.